All right, what's up, everyone? Thanks for joining on another Wednesday, August 14th. Um, we're here with the Multifamily Freedom Chasers. We're here to discuss brokers and deal underwriting. Um, I'm Edward. Kevin can't make it today. He's actually on a out of town and has a work-related event he's at. So, like I said, my name is Edward. I'm a realtor here based in the lovely and chaotic Los Angeles, California. Been in real estate for about 5 years now, and just grew up and around it, fell in love with it, got into the multifamily space, and went down that rabbit hole pretty fast. This is the first deal that I was a part of. It's 120 units in Florida. Great returns, great property, a lot of upside. Got a really good deal on this one. Really excited about it. You guys will hear me mention it a lot and talk about it. So if you guys have any questions particularly to this, want to be involved with anything, or just want to know how we went about it, please let me know. All right. This is the MSC family. You guys will see us on different calls, different events, see us in the group chat. Feel free to reach out, and we're all friendly, so don't hesitate to connect. Every Monday, Wednesday, you guys attach us here on Zoom with either the underwriting, broker outreach, financing, asset management, or the activation Zoom. Each has different personalities, different experiences, different focus points, and or fun guests. And then Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, WhatsApp is where you can find us. And then here's a group chat for the WhatsApp group. Great way to connect, network, meet people. Anyone that doesn't connect or doesn't think networking, no matter what group or room you're in, isn't worth it, this deal right here is every reason why it is. Because I started MFC, met someone who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to Kevin, who then landed us this deal. You never know how it's gonna happen. Now, if you told me before I started MFC, hey, you're gonna be a GP on a 120 unit deal in a city in Florida I'd never heard of before, I'd be like, cool story. What are you drinking? I'd love to have some. Because I was like, there's no way, like that's not gonna happen. But here we are, right? Um, put myself in the right position, got lucky, met the right people, found the right opportunity, and put our best foot forward, and here we are. So it's a journey. It's hard work, but it's fun, and obviously rewarding in the long run. So network, connect with people in this chat and other chats at all the Zooms. Just you never know who you're gonna meet and what connection they're gonna have. Today I had a 40+ minute conversation with a guy who has access to millions of dollars worth of capital and wants to, at one point owned, and actually maybe still does. We'll figure that out. Thousands of units, like 5 to 6,000 was the number. Had a 40-minute conversation with the guy off of one text. Told me his personal story, my story, and it was just a random phone call. So that's how the space works. You never know who can do what or who has done what, and where that next opportunity will come from. So take advantage of it. And speaking of, actually, one of the deals I want to look at is one of the first ones that we actually put an offer on, which was this Florida deal, 88 units, 18 million. Here's a rent roll. Here's a profit and loss. As you can see, this is a much older deal, which is why I don't mind sharing it. You guys can see the screen with the profit and loss, right? Yeah, very cool. We don't need that anymore. And then the rent roll, which is obviously as well outdated, but that's all fine because we're just using it as a reference point. Any questions in general with the underwriting or this calculator specifically before I go crazy into it?
Yeah, I got a question. So is this
Of
the
course.
profit and loss statement they gave you? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So
And you cross-reference it, right? Make sure the numbers are right.
So here's the thing. Until you're in, this is a great question, actually. I'm happy you asked that. The profit and loss, and especially when you're dealing with a broker, ideally you're dealing with a broker who has all the proper documents that are updated and recent. You only have their documentation and information to go off of. Like you can't pay me enough money and give me enough attempts to try to guess any single one of these numbers and think I'm gonna be remotely close. It's impossible. The only numbers I can really give you from the outside without having this information is what my future tax will be, because it has almost nothing to do with what they're paying now, what my insurance quote will be, because it almost has nothing to do with what they're paying now, and what my potential rents are. How I'm gonna get there, how long it's gonna take for me to get to the future rent, how much I have to spend to get to those future rents. I won't know until I see these numbers, like basically their existing T12, ideally, or P&L works, but I prefer T12. And or you've seen the property. All that's not happening until you're pretty much further along in the offering process. You're not gonna do that and walk every property, no matter how close it is or convenient it may seem. You're not gonna do that until you're actually serious about putting the offer in. So the P&L is strictly from the owners or sellers, and then either the broker gives it to you, or if it's you're direct to the seller. Hopefully they have it. Where this gets tricky is when it's like a mom and pop who self-managed it, and like I didn't keep track and records like that, and you're basically putting the pieces of a puzzle together and hoping it's okay for a lender. Because if you're getting a loan, this is where this becomes important. They don't care what happened to the property 3 months ago. They want to know what the condition is now, because that's what's the collateral. Obviously, your sponsor and principal are collateral as well, and they're gonna carry some weight on the qualification of the loan. But at the end of the day, you can only go after somebody so much. The building is what they're really lending on, and the performance of the building. So that's why getting this information and getting it accurate is almost a must, because at some point you're going to need it anyway. So not having it early on just makes everyone's life more difficult. Like if I get one from December, that means almost nothing to me, because to be fair, every lease could be expired. So it's like, okay, like in a week, a lot can change, yet alone in 8 months. So they give you this information. You just hope it's as accurate as they can get it, and most up to date, which is also important. If it's like a month or two for my initial underwrite, I'll be like, fine, you know, I'm not gonna nitpick. But once I'm getting ready to send an offer and things get like I need to tighten things up, then I'm 100% be like, okay, I need to see more up to date information, or it's a contingency. Bottom line, like I have to see it at some point. And a lot of the brokers and sellers will open up once you have an offer in, whether it's a formal offer or an LOI, whatever it is. That's essentially kind of how it's gonna play out. Long-winded answer, but it's definitely kind of just the way it is with documents and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you're pretty close on that. One thing I like to do that I've mentioned before, which I don't know if I did here because I might have been using a different document for reference, is I like using their expense column and using the order they have it in when I'm plugging it into this calculator. I didn't here, but normally that's what I like to do. Actually, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make a copy. And then I'm gonna go here. So I'm gonna do this. And go admin, payroll, R&M, access and utility. Because every document, T12, P&L, they're all going to be in their own weird order, and it's just going to be how they put it together. So you're really just going to base it off of however they have it set up. So for me to make my life easier, I'll just use it in the same order they have it. So here, total payroll expense, 109,788.
Can I ask, what software are you working with?
So this is a Michael Blank SDA one.
Michael what?
It's the Michael Blank SDA
Oh,
calculator.
Michael Blank. Michael Blank.
Yeah, it's one of the more common ones that I've seen. Relatively speaking, it's probably the one I've personally seen the most. But again, like mentioned earlier, you have different versions of them. I've seen other versions as well. It just comes down to preference at that point, and what you're looking to do. Because like there's some calculators that are better at X, Y, and Z than others, right? There's some that are better at showing the waterfall, which is one component of you can underwrite a deal. There's some that are better showing it on year-to-year differential, how you increase it every year, and the overall outlook. And then there's some that are just a little bit of both, but not great at either or. Or there's some that are just super complicated and you're just like, I don't get it. Or it's too simple, which is also another problem. If it's too simple, are you really getting the full underwrite that you're hoping for? And then it just comes down to getting more familiar with it, getting used to it. One thing I'd recommend is not to mess with it too much on the like editing side, which I'm notorious for doing any chance I get naturally, but not doing it too much in the beginning so that you're not confusing yourself, and also always have a master copy so that you're not scrambling to reverse something that you had changed, and aren't able to basically go back to original. Because like I play around with them a lot, and because of that, I have to make multiple copies. I keep an original, and then I also have to make sure that as I'm editing a property, I make a copy so I can save that. So if I get it back or something happens, I don't have to restart it, which is a mistake I made early on, which was not fun, because I found myself underwriting or plugging the numbers multiple times when I didn't need to. So there's that too. But I always say use the one you're most comfortable with and one that you have experience with, as long as you trust it and you relay the information that it's putting out there. That's a big part, obviously. And taxes is 258,256. Is there other calculators you guys have used or played around with or heard? I know you guys mentioned one earlier. Is there one you've used, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm using Lance Edwards software.
Okay, so it's a little different than this, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I haven't seen that one.
But I like his software though. It just my biggest point is when I'm running my numbers is knowing really my exit strategy. I need to know exactly how much the property is going to be worth after I, do my value add, and calculate 5 years down the road, 3 to 5 years down the road. What can I actually sell it for if I have to sell, to get out the loan, or can I refinance and hold it? So then my two, that's my stuck point is knowing what it's
Definitely.
worth after I do my value add, forced appreciation all over the place, and whatever numbers I get, what is it actually worth then? And I think one of the biggest things too is finding the market rate in areas. That's where I get stuck at. I know we could ask brokers.
You're talking about cap.
No.
So you're talking about the cap rate there, right?
The market cap rate, correct.
Okay. So
yeah, in the area.
it's good you brought that up.
Comparables to a single family home, yeah.
Yeah, so it's good that you brought that up because the cap rate really does come down to um it is market dependent. Also, one thing that I like about this one is this variable, which is the cap rate bump. I'm not sure if every calculator you guys are using has that. Why this is important is the cap rate is relative to the economy, right? So if it's something we have absolutely zero control over, like you can be the best operator in the world and say, I'm going to drop expenses like X percentage, I'm going to increase rents 8X percentage. You have no control about the rest of the market and what the market's going to bring. The cap rate bump takes whatever cap rate you put as today's, which is what you are going to hear from me. You'll get that number. Today's obviously it's easier to find, right? It's current market. You could do it in a couple ways. Finding comps. Look at similar properties. Look at what market cap rate those sold for. That's one way. Like you're basically just running a market analysis. You can ask, which I would do multiple of because you're never going to get the same answer. So you want to make sure that you kind of get in a ballpark of the cap rate of what other agents, brokers are saying. And then the third one would be property management companies. They see a lot of the transactions day to day. They see a lot of the rental. They're going to see the income. They're going to have an idea generally of what a property is worth. And at that point, you can kind of reverse engineer and figure out the cap rate, right? Just by getting an idea of what their income and their NOI is. The cap rate bump is there to be a buffer where if you look at the scenarios on the bottom of this one, the cap rate here is 5, okay? Let's say. On my exit strategy tab, when I go here, my cap rate at exit is 5.4 because I have this out as a 4-year exit and a cap rate bump of 0.1% a year. What that 5.4 does, and we may think like, oh, it's only 0.4%, it doesn't change much. If you look right here, the sales price at 18 million, if I change this to 5, that's 19.4 million. If I don't put that 0.4% buffer, which in grand scheme of things might not be a lot, that's $1.5 million difference on our return. When you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at your returns, that's a huge difference. Why that's important is if the market's in a different place, we don't know what's going to happen next month, yet alone 5 years from now. The market being in a different place, you want to make sure that you are putting in any buffer in place that if it's, let's say it's lower, let's say it is 5, and I could make that extra $1.5 million. Which conversation is more fun to have with your investors? Hey, we over buffered our sales price because we thought the cap rate would increase. We gave ourselves a 4.4% gap. It remained the same, or it got better. Let's say it went down to 4.7, or went down 0.4% the other direction, went to 3.6. So instead of losing $1.5 million from your initial underwrite, you gained $1.5 million. Now you have a net difference of $3 million. No investor is ever going to be mad at you because you found $3 million that you did nothing for, absolutely nothing. That's the best part. If you're just putting safety plans in place, you have $1.5 million window. Don't screw it up. Like that's the first buffer you're receiving, because we don't know, right? If people who bought property 3 years ago, or let's say even 4 years ago, when rates were 3% and cap rates were all over the place because your rates were so low, if they didn't put a buffer in today, you're done. I don't care what price you bought it at. If you're forced to exit today, you're done. You're just not even close. The rates doubled, right? And the rates directly affect the cap rate. So that's why you put the buffer in. So I'm happy you brought that up because although, yes, it is tricky and like, what is it realistically? What the cap rate is for your entry is relative to the deal. Like, I don't care about the cap rate if I'm doing a seller carry, assumable loan. All of a sudden, that's all thrown out the window because I have a 3.7% interest rate. Cap rate's going to be whatever it is, or I'm putting a high down payment to make up for that, the LTV there. So those are all different factors where the cap rate isn't as cut and dry and there's no like one size fits all. But on the exit, it's definitely important to keep in mind. So that's what I would do. Go get a couple different opinions on it, see what the comps say, see what agents say, see what management companies say, and then add a little bit of a buffer. Anywhere from 0.1 to 0.2% a year, you should be fine. But that's also knowing that what market it's in. In LA, you're screwed anyway. Where I live, like it's just gonna suck regardless. But in places where it might be a little more volatile, that's something to keep in mind as well. Like if it's really high, what are the factors of that? Or if it's really low, whatever the case is. But that's a good question because that drastically changes your returns. And we can even do that experiment real quick. Yeah, it almost doubles your return, like percentage wise. So that's essentially what you want to do with the profit and loss. Ideally, you have a T12. Let me even see if I have a T12. No. So a T12 is better because kind of to the point that was brought up earlier, the T12s allows you to see the change month to month. It allows you to see any big potential expenses, expenditures, any issues the property may have had. They're going to be highlighted much more when you have a T12 because it stands out like a sore thumb. If you're looking at a row of numbers and you all of a sudden see a 5-digit number where the rest are 3, your eyes are going to go to that and you can be like, okay, what happened X month, X line, and you get a question to ask the broker, but also it helps you with future underwriting and due diligence. Also, I think one thing too is making sure you know like as many lines as their expenses may be, because some keep it short, some have it extra long, and everything in between. Making sure that you're going through it and seeing like, is there anything here that I wouldn't have, or anything that I would add? A lot of times, almost all the time, if it's like a mom and pop, this is the only property they own, and it's self-managed, well, that's an expense you're accruing now. So if you don't underwrite that day one, you're just cutting out an expense that you are 99% gonna have. Like, and if not, you're gonna write it into the deal anyway. And then keeping in mind what else you actually are gonna use and need based on the location, the property. Go ahead. Yeah, go
Hey,
ahead.
so my question here is when you when you find a property with moms and pops, right? How do you write your expenses? This is what I've heard. Some say 30, you put in 35%, 40%, and 45%. And in Houston, 50%. I'm hearing it all over. So what are you
So
comfortable with? If you don't have any expenses, because the mom and pops, they don't keep records, right? How do you get that number for you to be comfortable to say, I would take this down?
So first thing is, you're in for fun runaround because lending is going to be a pain and just overall underwriting is going to be a pain when you have limited resources. Second question I would ask is, do you get a utility bill? How much are you paying for insurance, taxes? At least have a baseline then. I don't like the personal rule of thumb number of just like 1% will fit all, because that's not the case. But if I had to put a percentage in, okay, well, here's where I'm going to throw a wrench into your question. What you said 35, 45, 50%, right? What number is that percentage relative to? Where is that pulled from? The income, right?
Right. It affects the income.
Okay, so
Correct.
if I tell you the income on a property monthly is 100,000, you tell me, okay, I'm going to put the expenses at 50%. That's 50,000 expenses, right? But
Mhm.
now, what if I add to the equation, the property is 60% occupied? Oh, so that means the income is drastically lower than it should be, right?
Correct.
50% doesn't work anymore. Your tax and insurance alone can kill 50%, yet alone everything else because your income doesn't support it. Remember, you have two expenses, well, more than two, but let's just talk about the two big ones. Tax and insurance that do not care how much money your property brings in. It could be performing at the absolute best and you're bringing in 100,000 a month, or it could be on the floor and it's bringing in 10,000 a month. The same property. Your insurance and tax are not going to change. They don't care. right? So if you tell me I'm putting 50%, but the property's running at 60% occupancy, that number is completely wrong. Your tax and insurance might cover 50%. So you see how that's relative? I don't want to say you put 50% on everything and you bring me a property that's running at 40% vacancy and you put 50%, you're like, hey, I think it works. I'm like, if you go get an insurance quote, you're underwater. And then forget about your tax, right? So if it's like, see, that's the problem. That's the tricky part. And I hate to give you this answer because it's not really a direct one, but it really comes down to depends on the deal. You need some basis, and that's what this is for. This may not be right. This may not be accurate. This may not be how I would run it. It may not be any of that. But at least I know at the time that I got these numbers, or as hopefully as soon to that date as possible, this is what they're currently operating at. Now I have a floor. I have a baseline. Hey, I think this could be better. I think this would be more expensive, whatever it is. But you have a baseline. If you have nothing, well, here's the two things you can do. Okay, so let's start there. You can get a tax quote. You have a ballpark of what your taxes are. And at that point, if you really think the deals we're pursuing, shop around to a few insurance guys and get a quote there. Hopefully, if it's a broker involved, especially on the sales side, they've done their homework and they have some of that information. If you have an OM, they should have this. They should have put something together. How accurate it is besides the point. They would put something together. If you're direct to the seller, I'll just go and shop it myself. Because you're gonna find, let's be fair, we all know this. You're gonna find your best deal going direct to the seller. If they're running it the way you just described, that's gonna be the best deal. Just getting it's gonna be like pulling teeth. But it's worth it. So those hoops you have to jump through, those double checking the work, the quotes you're gonna have to go get, the hey, send me your utility bill for the building. I don't have one. Oh, great. Okay, so now ballpark, how much is a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom unit in Houston, Texas gonna use? All right, spitball it. Like, because at the end of the day, how are you gonna pitch this to an investor if you don't know those numbers? It's 50%. Okay, what are you doing to improve it? I'm doing ABC. Okay, great. What is it at now? I don't know. Okay, so how do you know if you're actually gonna improve it? If someone's gonna give you 100,000 plus, you're gonna need more than I put 50% for the expenses. You know what I like? It's just the reality of it. But your return can be exponentially better because it's an opportunity where not many people want to do the work of pulling the teeth, to be fair. Um, so that's what I would do. First thing, I'll try to get the quote for try to get a quote for like insurance, get the tax, knock out the big ticket items that I know you're gonna have. Here's another one, payroll. How many units is it? Are you gonna have a payroll based on how many units it is? If it's 150 units, okay, your payroll, you can ballpark, I'm gonna need one maintenance guy, one on-site um, rental, or one on-site property management employee. Those are some things that you can factor in. Okay, great. Have that. Repairs maintenance hopefully are low anyway because you're gonna return the units. That's ideal. But then you just have to go over turnover costs or rehab budget. So you're kind of gonna kill two birds with one stone there, where you're gonna get an idea of both. As you're gonna more familiarize yourself with the market and what these units need, you can get a better idea of what the cost is to turnover versus rehab, and then obviously um, the ARV, which is the rental value, which is what I would be referring to at that point. So that's a good question. It's not fun, but it's definitely very worth it. And then also lenders may be a good person to ask too, regarding what they see potential expenses. What they underwrite it at is always going to be helpful because remember the lender is always going to be your best friend. They want you to close on the deal and they want to fund your deal as much as you want to acquire it, but they're also not going to make an investment they don't think is worth it, which kind of gives you a second look at the underwriting. So keep that in mind too. Another thing that this one has that you want to look at too is the other income. This one is a little weird because it's separated by Section 8, late fees, miscellaneous, and then rental income. I believe the way they have this set up is that the Section 8 is in addition to what they collect on the rental side. Um, and then, so that's considered your rental income, and then you have late fees and miscellaneous. But other income is really a big component into how you're going to do the underwrite, because it's going to really change what your potential upside is, and it says a lot about the tenants. One thing you don't want to do is say, hey, I get a lot of late fees here, and I'm going to continue getting a lot of late fees. That's going to make my NOI go up. Yes and no, because that also is like you're going to have more tenant problems. Like, let's just be realistic. If it's like, especially if it's excessive and very consistent. If it's like the one-off, you get like a little jump, or if it's like a couple $100 here and there a month, cool, manageable. A couple thousand a month, you're just like, all right, just getting out of hand. Those aren't tenants you're gonna keep around long anyway. And it's too much of a variable. Like consistently, if you know you're doing a rubs or a bill back, um, or tenants are paying their own utilities because it's separately metered, whatever the case is, that's a consistent additional income that I can account for. If it's a variable late fee or security deposit income, you're better off not including that than overvaluing it and having it change your exit. Because remember, the NOI is gonna factor this exit number entirely, and this sales price is gonna have a drastic effect on the summary return of your overall. Because when you go to the returns and whatever the numbers are, it's not really relevant to this where the numbers sit. But what's really important here is to see how much of that you're getting on the back end. So if this is the cash flow and returns, how much of it is returned at the exit? That's going to drastically bump these numbers up. Like we did with the experiment of changing this from 5.4 to 5. That $1.5 million changed this number a lot. Because before that, this was 19. So it's really important to keep in mind, like, hey, every dollar in the NOI, one way or another, is going to really change these numbers, and those small things really add up. So you want to make sure you're getting that other income in positive places. You're getting, whether it's bill back or XYZ, like I was mentioning. Any questions on like the whole exit strategy itself, or like what you're gonna really look for? Because remember, you're gonna have the sales cost. You're gonna have your outstanding loan balance, which you want to make sure is, you know, your loan terms, because your loan terms are going to be very important. This one was an assumable loan, that's why the rate's so low. But you also have to make sure that is your interest only accurate. If it is, great. Like, have you paid down the principal between now and when you plan to exit? How much of it have you paid down based on how many months your interest only? Those are so those are really two big components of the exit. Because this all factors into your returns again. It's the cash flow versus the big boom at the end. And that's important to know too when you're looking at this screen with the returns, is knowing the type of investor a specific deal may be great for. There's some people who I want cash on cash to be 10%, nothing less. I don't care what happens at the end. I want that return. Sweet. That's just the type of investor you're gonna be. They are, and that's the type of deals they're gonna look at. But you may have the one that says, I don't care what happens between now and the 5th year. I just want the amount of money I gave you to be this amount when I get it back, or higher, whether it's a 2x multiple or whatever number they want. That's another approach. Or some people just like the depreciation, and that's a completely different story, because then you're like, okay, what's my cost seg? That comes down to knowing a good cost seg person and knowing a ballpark of what that's going to look like on this. You're not going to have that until you're further along the escrow process and the acquisition. So you're not going to think about that during your underwrite. A nice little bonus is we never underwrite for the depreciation on the cost seg side for two reasons. One, it's way too specific to the certain investor or LP that puts money into the deal. So it's to put one rule fits all, one size fits all, it's not going to work. So I would definitely not market that, because then at the end if an investor can't allocate all of that depreciation that they would receive into their personal taxes or whatever the case is, CPA talk basically, I wouldn't want to be having that conversation because that's not a fun one. Hopefully they're checking with a CPA regardless, but does everyone know what kind of cost seg, depreciation, what all that entails? Any questions on that? Eric, I think were you trying to say something?
No, I'm still unfamiliar with a lot of those things.
Okay. So
So I
essentially
don't.
what the cost seg, yeah, so essentially what cost seg on the depreciation side is, it's you're accelerating the depreciation of the asset. And by that, anyone invested into the deal is going to receive a percentage write-off or depreciation from their taxes. But there's a lot of loopholes, not loopholes, a lot of hoops you have to jump through to make sure you qualify and what percentage of that total amount you qualify for. Like, for example, if you're doing an IRA investment, you don't qualify to receive any of that because it's an IRA investment and it's not like your tax income essentially. And again, definitely double check the CPA. I'm by no means claiming I'm an expert in this, and a lot of times when we talk about this, it goes once we dive too far into this, it can get very confusing. But just keep in mind that if you hear that mentioned at all, or people are going to ask you about the cost seg and the depreciation, just say it's like our approach was, it's a bonus onto whatever underwriting we've already provided, because every person's situation is different, and they should go to their own CPA, accountant, whoever you trust your taxes, and we'll give you what we have, and you determine what you can take from it. Because at the end of the day, we're not doing everyone's taxes, and nor do I claim to remotely understand all the inner workings of this. I'm not going to speak for someone else on what they can and can't do, because I'd hate for that surprise at the end of the year or in April of, hey, you have this bill, you XYZ don't work, or you get audit, whatever the case is. Yeah, I'm not about to have that liability, for example. But it's something to keep in mind because it's a question that's asked, right? And you just want to know what it entails. So it is essentially what it is accelerating the depreciation of the building. There's companies that do it on the activation Zoom on our YouTube. You'll see that we've had Yona, I believe is his name, that has discussed that a lot. So you'll be able to go back, listen to those older videos on our YouTube. Just type MFC into YouTube and then look for the activation Zooms, and you'll be able to see the cost seg one. It's informative. It's good to know. Don't try to fully understand it by any means. Don't try to go get your CPA license for it. But it's just something that you're going to be able to add value to any investor when you're having the conversation. And like I said, we don't put into our underwriting because there's just too many factors. So it's just a cherry on top of already a great deal. And that's the plan. That's kind of the mindset we have. I don't know how we got over to cost seg, but it is a good topic. It is something that's really important in this space and a lot of people look for. So it's definitely something you want to know about. Any other questions regarding that? We have a couple minutes left.
I have a
I
question
want
on
to just open up.
cost seg here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I don't have a camera on this computer.
You're fine.
Cost seg, as far as towards the end of the year, there's a lot of offerings coming up because everybody's looking for the tax benefits. Now, if you're a GP or a LP, it seems like they have different percentages, how, I guess, what you're investing, what you're getting in the cost seg. And then also when the building is being sold or the property is being sold, aren't you losing some of that cost seg after the building is sold that they can claw back?
The second part of your question, I'm not too sure. I'm gonna be very straight up with you because I haven't been through full cycle, so I don't know the impact on the back end. What I can tell you is that on the front end is you are normally and at least my experience with it, the cost seg is going to go to the LPs first for two reasons. One, there's a chance a lot of them aren't going to need it, and all of it's not going to get used up. Secondly, is their money's at risk. The cost seg is one of the first things that you can ensure an LP investor that you are going to be, they're seeing the fruits of the investment, right? If I'm a GP, remember, when I'm, as a GP, you're going to wear two hats most of the time. I'm the GP, and then, hey, I'm the LP. What I'm referring to in this situation is being specifically the GP. And you may have money invested into the deal. Most of the time you will. Let's say you put $100,000 into your own deal. The GP percentage you own won't be allocated cost seg up front. Or first, I should say. But that $100,000 investment that makes you an LP as well will. Why? Because first you're going to take care of the money, which is the money investors, the LP, and then you worry about the GP. Now, does everyone do it that way? Probably not. If people are investing their money, I would put them in front of the GPs personally. And then at that point, it comes down to who's a GP and who actually needs what after that, because maybe not everyone on GP side is going to need it, is going to be able to take advantage of the cost seg. And it's not a small amount. It could be anywhere from 20 to 40%. Right? So keep that in mind too. But that's a good question. Like, it really does come down to who's going to use it, who's going to be able to take advantage of it, and then whatever is left. And remember, this is also probably going to be written in your PPM. So whatever lawyer is putting that together, I would have that conversation with them, kind of get an idea of how it's usually run from them on their end, what they see the most often. And that's also why I don't include in the underwriting, because it just makes it way too confusing. I hope that helped and answer your question. I just personally don't know enough about it on the exit to say one way or the other, and how that's going to impact the taxes. I definitely am not even going to try to guess. I would refer to someone on the cost seg side, definitely an accountant, or CPA that's going to be able to better answer that one. The tax component of it on that end is not an area I'm very familiar with. When I go through a full cycle, I'll definitely have a better idea, but as of now, I don't. Taxes are confusing anyway, especially when you involve real estate. So as a GP, I'm never promising anyone anything on the tax side. But these are just things that are good to know. I hope that helped a little. Any questions? Just got a couple minutes left. I know we're a little all over the place, but I do like the questions. I like the involvement. As you can see, just by looking at something simple as just a P&L and going through it, you can kind of quickly go over our time here and how many different factors you have, and how relevant this really is with the expenses compared to the income. So I think that's a big one. Like, if you're 18% under your market rent, your percentage of expenses is going to be very elevated, I guess, or inflated, I should say. So I did put my phone number in the chat. I mean, not the chat, under my name. I forgot to do that earlier. So if you guys have questions, write my number down. If you guys want to chat, if you have a deal you want to look at, if you have any fun opportunities, like I mentioned today, I spoke to someone on the phone for a very long time. We're really looking for deals now. He was a very good call. He's looking to do a lot of stuff. He has a lot of access to capital, wants to be a GP on properties and deals. And we don't really, he's not too picky on location. Neither am I. We're both West Coast, so he's in the Arizona area. So if there's anything you guys have that may look like a good opportunity, may look like something that we can tackle, may look like something that some legs to it, you just need to fill the holes of the actual structure and the team and we have a sponsorship behind us. We have principal, which is big for the lending side. And then of course the experience with thousands of units as well. We'd love to check that out. Anything from Florida, Georgia, Texas. Shoot, if you give me a good deal in my backyard in LA, as crazy and as much as people hate it, I like it. I'm still gonna buy stuff back here naturally. Maybe it's not gonna be 100 units because that cost me an arm, a leg, and much more. So I'm not gonna do that. But if it's anything like 10 up, 15 up, even 4 to 5, I like it. Jeffrey, you had something?
You just answered it. I was going to ask you how many doors. Yes, and you said it. I'm sorry.
In LA, in LA, it's gonna be smaller. I prefer smaller because of just how many hoops you have to jump through at that point. I'd rather have more buildings and more
like 4 to
land
10?
than
Yeah.
yeah. Because in LA specifically, I want more land. Elsewhere, I want more units. Here, I just care about the property itself because the upside will come through the equity and not on the cash flow. If I'm relying on the cash flow in LA, I'm underwater.
Okay. All right, Edward, I got to go. I got to jump on another Zoom call at 6 o'clock p.m.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, though. I enjoy it.
Take care. Are you based in LA?
No, I'm in Antioch.
Okay.
I'm in San Francisco, northern.
Got it. All right, cool. Take care. On that note, we're gonna jump off. Thank you guys for tonight. Great call. And we will connect again. We do have a Zoom on Monday, so make sure you're there. And thank you for tonight.